Ready in 3, 2, 1.
On here. Hey, this is Keith Shovlin, aois21 Media here at Walls of Books in Washington, D.C. And we're going to start here with the live readings from the 2017 aois21 Annual. We have with us two aois21 creatives, Thomas P. Athridge and James D. King. They'll be reading from their submissions for the annual this year. So hopefully watch along. And this, if you missed parts of it, this video will be posted on the aois21 YouTube channel and media.aois21.com afterwards. So, all right. Hey, Tom. You're Tom. John, can I get you to be cameraman? All right.
I hope you've got a copy of the...
What am I doing now? So we just aim towards the front?
I don't have a phone, and I don't have a copy.
All right. Yeah. Make yourselves comfortable, guys. So the annual was finished today, so we're going to be actually having it on computer. For those that need to do reading first time, you could just read from the paperback copy of your book.
Yeah.
But for Jim, it's going to be more of an issue. Unfortunately, since the annual got finished so close to this event, we didn't really have a good chance to get more people available to come out for it. Like the last piece for the annual, my welcome message, I actually recorded this morning. So for those that watching this video and then picking up the annual, you'll see I'm wearing the exact same clothes in both videos. And of course, take a chance to see the beautiful cover art by Ronna Gaynor. We actually have the cover art in printed out for people as a coloring thing. In fact, she said that she created it originally as a coloring thing for children that came up to her table at Capsicon. System is a little bit slow after working all day finishing up the annual. All in all, we had 15 contributors this year. Once again, an around the world focus. We actually, for the first time, had poetry pieces that in 2 languages. We had a presentation of pieces submitted by Dr. Athridge that she wrote in both English and Greek. So we have those available in the annual this year. We have a poet, a 13-year-old poet from Iowa with her first submission and appearing in the poetry section. So that was nice being able to have a younger contributor as well as the more mature contributors that we're used to having, like Tom and Jim here.
Is this from the Christmas one or the book?
Sorry, just show a few things. All right, Jim, did you want to read your story?
Let him go first.
Okay, Tommy has to go first. All right. So Tom's going to be reading from his excerpt of the new book, American Presidents at War, now available in paperback, $20, and then ebook for $10, hardcover coming soon. So we'll be reading from the chapter. I'll stop you when we're at a good point. That's good. There we go. We'll be reading from Chapter 11, The Korean War and the Decisions of both Presidents Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower. So take it away, Tom.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
The American military involvement in the Korean War began on June 25th, 1950, after North Korea had invaded territory south of the 38th parallel. Korea was under the control of the Japanese, who had conquered it during World War II, but had regained its territory in the war's conclusion in 1945. At the time of the war's end, Korea was occupied in the north by the Soviet Union and in the south by the United States. President Truman did not give South Korea any military weapons for fear that the South Korean government would unnecessarily attack the North. However, the reality was that North Korea was being readily supplied by the Soviet Union with all the modern weapons of the time. Also, from 1945 to 1950, the North Korean army grew to 136,000 troops. North Korea waited for the chance to attack and take over the South, which occurred on June 25, 1950. On that day, 7 North Korean divisions attacked the South with Russian artillery to support them. The South Korean army was outnumbered and outmatched with inferior firepower. President Truman was not even told about the communist invasion of the 30th parallel until 9 hours after the fact. Because the newspapers knew about the invasion in Korea before Truman did, the president was extremely angry. He knew that the North Korea's actions of hostility against his neighbor would certainly motivate American involvement into the war. But in order to understand why President Truman made the decision to fight an aggressor overseas while putting American soldiers' lives at risk, it is important to understand the background of our nation's 33rd President of the United States and why he felt it was so important to defeat a communist enemy in a world still reeling from the effects of the Second World War in a faraway land in Asia known as Korea. Harry Truman was born on May 8, 1884 in Lamar, Missouri. Truman was born in a racist and segregated society where lynchings of African Americans were common. Truman's father, John Anderson Truman, was a farmer and a livestock trader who suffered a severe financial setback by losing all of his money after investing in a bad crop of wheat in 1901. This incident occurred during Harry's senior year at Independence High School. At the time, Harry applied to West Point but was rejected. As a result, Harry did not attend any school and became a bank clerk. Truman would go on to become a successful banker, deacon, and farmer before he joined the military in 1917 to fight in World War I. Truman had many legitimate excuses not to go to war, including having bad vision, being past the draft age, and being the sole financial supporter to his mother and sister. Despite these facts, Truman chose to serve in the armed forces anyway. Truman felt strongly that we owed France something for Lafayette, and he believed strongly in the Allied cause. The slaughter of people in the war before Americans' entry in it during April 1917 can only be described as barbaric. In 1916, there was an estimated 2 million casualties on the Western Front. In a 4-month battle of the Somme, July to November 1916, Germany lost more troops than the United States did during the entire Civil War. When German Austria-Hungary aggression finally provoked the United States into the war, the U.S. Army grew from 14,000 to 2 million men during its peak. Truman's own conduct during the war campaign won him praise from his troops and his superiors. He was described as having great personal conduct and strength as a leader of men. Praise for Truman including recognition for saving the lives of his men during battle and for making wise decisions to avoid capture or slaughter. Truman became widely admired and commended for his military service. Truman's lifelong heroes included Andrew Jackson and Robert E. Lee. Upon Truman's return from the war in Europe, he married his wife Bess on the day the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919. He was also convinced by his friend Mike Pendergrass to enter the political world by running for a vacant judicial position in 1922, and Truman won the position. Truman remained a judge until January 1935. Truman's duties included handling and operating a budget of over $7 million, which he did successfully. A vacant U.S. Senate seat opened in the state of Missouri in 1934. Truman decided to campaign for and pursue the Senate job, and he was victorious in this election. Once Truman was on Capitol Hill, he was vocal in his beliefs that the United States was mistaken at the end of World War I by not signing the Treaty of Versailles and by not joining the League of Nations. This would influence Truman's decisions later when he became president. During this time, President Roosevelt was sending Britain supplies and money to fight Germany. Roosevelt proclaimed that the people around the world should be guaranteed 4 freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, freedom from fear. These rights are still held true in today's democracy. When Truman advanced to the U.S. Senate, he often found himself in agreement with President Roosevelt and his policies and voted accordingly. During Roosevelt's unprecedented 4th straight campaign for president in 1944, Senator Truman's name was mentioned for the vice presidential slot on the ticket, but names like Henry Wallace were the more likely picks. However, in a surprise move to some, President Roosevelt did pick Harry Truman. This decision was made by President Roosevelt because in his mind, Truman filled 2 roles that satisfied the president. 1, Truman was the least controversial of the candidates Roosevelt had selected, and 2, Truman would be the most logical choice to replace Roosevelt should he not be able to finish a 4th term. Truman claimed victory on the second ballot at the Democratic Convention of 1944. Roosevelt and Truman would go on to win the presidency and vice presidency on November 7th, 1944. During the struggle against the Axis powers, through the struggle of the Axis powers had started to turn in favor of the Allied side, Roosevelt was visibly growing more sick as 1945 began. On April 12, 1945, President Roosevelt died and Vice President Harry Truman became the 33rd President of the United States. When he took office, Truman insisted that the war would not end until the Axis powers had unconditionally surrendered. On May 7, 1945, Truman got exactly that from Germany. Hitler and Eva Braun had already committed suicide together on April 30, 1945. In the Pacific War theater, American B-29 attacks in Japan on March 9th and 10th, 1945 killed 100,000 people. However, the Japanese were known for not giving up in war and also for being tremendous fighters. Truman knew that the only way to force the Japanese military powers to the negotiating table was the use of the atomic bomb. Truman decided that in order to save American soldiers' lives, and the lives of the Japanese for that matter, and end the war quickly as possible, which some experts estimated could last as long as 1947, with an additional 200,000 U.S. casualties inflicted in a land invasion of Japan, the use of the bomb was absolutely necessary. The first explosion of a nuclear bomb in history was successfully orchestrated at Alamo Gordo Air Base in New Mexico on Monday, July 16, 1945. Hiroshima was picked as a target to strike with a nuclear weapon because it was Japan's Southern Army headquarters and a depot for Japan's homeland army. President Truman felt that this was the only way to get Japan to surrender and successfully end the war. When the second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, Japan on August 9, 1945, Japan had no choice but to formally surrender. They would officially do so on the battleship Missouri on August 15, 1945, effectively ending World War II. When the war was officially over and the Allies had won, President Truman enjoyed this victory, but his joy would not last long. Though America and his allies had defeated fascism in 1945, Truman would say, "Sherman is wrong, peace is hell." President Truman was thrust into power to lead a country that was celebrating victory over the most powerful combination of enemies this nation had ever faced, and he was overwhelmed by the adulation. 12 million victorious GIs came home after the war and waited for opportunity to go to college and succeed in the federal government. However, at this time, labor and business were at each other's throats. While Truman was not in control of the pricing, he was blamed for not doing enough to solve the economic crisis. To help the economy, Truman proposed increases in the minimum wage as well as housing aid. Truman also drafted a bill for the first prepaid medical insurance in the history of the country. However, Republicans and some Democrats rejected all of Truman's proposals. Truman compared being president to riding a tiger or either hang on or get eaten. To make matters worse, 1946 brought 5,000 new strikes to America. President Truman desperately needed to have labor support as a Democrat, but many were angry at him and he at them. Truman loathed strikes, and that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what the railroad employees did in May 1946, which crippled an important transportation industry and the mobility of the American public. In response, President Truman threatened to draft the strikers into the armed services. In fact, President Truman went so far as to appear before a joint session of Congress while appealing against the strike to ask permission to implement this draft of striking men. In a surprising development, this tactic ended the railroad strike literally in the middle of Truman's speech in front of Congress, which inspired the members to applaud from the chamber. Although this was a triumph for President Truman, he paid a high price for this victory. It cost him labor support, which proved disastrous for the Democrats during the midterm elections of 1946. During this time, Truman's popularity as president hit rock bottom. The phrase "to err is human" was popular at the time. Inflation was out of control also.
All right, Tom, I think we're going to cut you off there.
Okay.
That's a lot to get through. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Now, set that there. Thank you. Next up, I would like to invite up our Chief of Publishing, Corey Parker, to talk about all of the great submissions we had this year. He's the person that so far has read every single piece that is in the annual, so he is the authority on it. So come on up, Corey.
Hey. How's it going? We had a lot of poetry this year, just like last year, and I'm probably not the best person to speak about that, but I will mention all of the short stories we did, as well as the excerpts. We had a number of new contributors this year. I think think 3 or 4. Yeah.
More than that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of short stories.
Oh, short stories, yes.
So we had a nice, light, but very well executed, sort of romantic mise en scène by Ellis Engler called Magic Fingers, set in a massage parlor. It's pretty interesting. I like what you did with dialogue and tone, and it's just a really, really interesting story. And then we had a shorter story called Home Alone by, I think that was Daniel Goodman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Or,
Home Alone was Matt Byerly.
Yes, Matt Byerly, my mistake. Matt Byerly, and there was a really nice twist at the end that I really didn't see coming. So I'd recommend checking that one out. And finally, we had a longer story called The Strange Odyssey of Sammy Oliver, and that was by Daniel Goodman. Yeah, and it's sort of a Kafkaesque half dream, half reality sequence, and I really like that one too. And in addition to that, we had some excerpts from books we'll be publishing or just have published. You just heard from Tom Athridge reading from his book, American Presidents at War. And then also we have an excerpt from the 3rd installment of the Hive series by James D. King. And that's coming out, well, as soon as we can get it out.
Mid-November.
Mid-November, there we go. And finally we had the first chapter from the long-awaited epic fantasy, The Will of the Magi, by Paul Dickinson Russell, who can't be here today because he's in New Jersey. But Paul has spent many years working on that book, and I'm excited to read those 250,000 words. Chapter 1 is short, though. It's only 3,700, so don't be daunted.
It's a morsel to
Thank you.
tide you over until the full meal that is Paul's book is available. Thank you very much, Corey.
Sure.
Corey, get me back to
Okay.
the story.
So next up, we're going to have James D. King up to read his short story, Buffalo Hunter. He's going to be reading off the computer, so please bear with him. Ladies and gentlemen, James D. King. Oh, yeah. Yeah, why don't you have a seat here, Jim? A lot easier to read from the computer there.
This is my short story, The Buffalo Hunter. Autumn's sun warmed the hunter's back as he shot buffalo almost 1,000 feet away with his Sharps rifle. The herd moved off, and then he drove his wagon to the kill site. It was while skinning hides off the dead beast that a tremendous crack of thunder shook the sky above. The thunder was accompanied by a blast of wind, and the wind gust sent his broad-brimmed hat skimming across the prairie, past his wagon half filled with hides. The sudden thunder and blowing hat spooked the horse teams hitched to the wagon. The startled animals raced off, taking with them the wagon that contained all that he owned. The hunter flinched also at the thunderclap. He jumped up to watch the wagon bounce across the flat grassland. Beyond, in the direction the wagon was headed, the sky was dark, with dirty gray clouds that had a white band at the bottom. He knew the white band was snow. It pushed across the prairie towards him like a curtain closing off the horizon. Above him, blackbirds flew ahead of the coming storm. A veteran of 10 years on the high plains of Montana, he recognized the sign of an early blizzard that would bring frigid temperatures and last for days. The hunter surveyed his options. There was no fear, only a pragmatic appraisal of how to survive. He could follow the tracks of the wagon team across the prairie, but that might take several hours, and the trail could be lost under the approaching snow. His other choice was to find shelter and wait out the blizzard. From where he stood, the tops of a grove of trees on a hill gleamed green several miles away. On the high plains, a hill with trees was a rarity. He had camped on that very same hill last year and remembered an old lean-to shelter near the top. The walk to the hill would take about 3 hours, he figured. Chances were good he'd beat the oncoming storm. Blackbirds soaring on a blustery wind looked down on the lone figure carrying a rifle and walking towards a distant hill. Thick, driving snow made it impossible for him to see the hilltop. Had to be getting near the trees, he thought. The trek had taken a long time. The storm had moved in faster than expected and had slowed him down. His smooth-soled leather boots provided little traction in the snow now, and he was moving up the hill. Falls were frequent, forcing him to use his hands to push against the wet, snow-covered ground. The leather gloves he wore for skinning were not meant for snow and quickly soaked through. To keep his hands from freezing, he shoved them under his armpits, cradling the rifle in his crossed arms. Adding to his difficulties were the storm clouds covering the sky, forcing an early night. He still had to fix up the old lean-to and get a fire going once he reached it. In the darkness and the blowing snow, neither task would be easy. There was a lull in the wind, and he paused to get his bearings. Removing a hand from his armpit to wipe the snow stuck to his eyebrows and eyelashes so that he could see, he realized the Sharp's rifle was no longer in his arms. Pivoting, he looked behind him. Nothing visible but trackless snow. Must have lost it when he fell last time, he assumed. He was so cold that he had not felt it slip away. There was no anger in his loss, only a calculation of odds. To go back to look for the rifle now would take time, and time was something not to be wasted. The longer he was in the blizzard, the more likely he was to die. In the momentary slackness of the wind, there was a sharp smell of wood smoke. Narrowed eyes searched the blowing whiteness above him. Fire meant someone else was holed up in the woods, waiting out the blizzard. And that meant a shelter already prepared and a fire already started. It might mean food also. If there was no food, he'd kill the son of a bitch with his skinning knife and eat him. He'd done it before. Blackbirds perching in a tree watched the snow-covered hunter move closer. As he neared the stand of trees, the hunter saw a brief glint of light in the darkness. The flash came from what appeared to be a hut a few yards inside the tree line. Wind gusts were lifting the edge of the door flap, letting light escape into the dim evening. An enclosed hut was better than an open-sided lean-to. The hunter did not smile at his good fortune. In the waning light, he could just make out that the snow-covered hut was round and domed like those of the Cree Indians. The opening covered by the flapping animal hide was small and close to the ground. Pulling the large skinning knife from its belt sheath, the hunter went to his knees in front of the hut. If there were Indians inside, he'd have to kill them first thing. Indians hated white buffalo hunters. He crawled through the door flap as rapidly as possible, rolled to his right, and stood in a crouch, ready to attack. What he first noticed was the silent warmth inside. A small fire in a pit barely lit the center of the hut, leaving darkness around the edges. Buffalo hides were lashed to the bent saplings. The thick snow that covered the outside insulated the shelter from the howling wind and the brutal cold. The hunter's bare head rubbed against the top of the hut. There was a haze of smoke lingered, and it took him a few seconds to distinguish a single form sitting on the other side. Okay, I got to freeze up here. Might be a good place to stop.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, James D.K. Author of the Hive series and co-author of Ghost Burglar. Available here at Lost Books. Yeah, sorry, like I said, my system's been a little overtaxed.
Okay.
I have time now at 5:05. We can do one more reading if you guys want, or we can go ahead and cut it off here. What do you think?
Do you? Maybe a poem?
Well, I was going to read my essay.
Oh, yeah. I haven't even talked about that.
Yes, we did have one essay this year, and it's something I wrote. It is the first of a planned series of essays that will be a book called Taking Control. Over the past, I think it's October now, so that would be 18 months. I've gone through a lifestyle change personally, gone from a adult male that was once a chronic. So I'm just going to read this quickly because apparently the phone we're broadcasting on is having some battery issues. So this is one of the first pieces from the upcoming book, Taking Control, a CDE guide to getting in shape, and submitted as an essay for the AS21 annual. The cost of being fat. This is not an article about economics or risk of predation. Yes, it costs money to be fat. Studies put it around $5,000 per annum for women and $3,000 for men. In wild animals, being overweight is a death sentence, both as a predator and prey. In humans, it might as well be. So let's look at the actual costs of being fat, beyond the dollar sign. Food isn't that expensive. If you're eating out all the time, yes, food will cost a lot. But the cheapest food at the grocery store tends to be that which makes us fatter. It's cheaper to buy candy bars than energy bars. Diet and protein shakes cost far more than sodas and alcohol. Well, some alcohol. Organic fruits and vegetables not only cost more than the higher calorie counterparts, but also last for a shorter time, requiring them to be eaten quickly or thrown away and replaced. It's not necessarily what we eat, but the amount of what we eat that leads to our trouble. Focusing on the cost of food to a fat person is literally going after the low-hanging fruit, or low-hanging donuts, even though those don't grow on trees. There is a reason the phrase tightening one's belt is still around, even though we don't use money purses that are tied shut and hang from our belts anymore. Speaking of belts, it costs a lot to clothe a fat person. This seems obvious when you consider the basic economics of it, supply and demand. You need more cloth to create waist size 44 pants or a size 16 dress, so they will cost more than waist size 32 and size 8, respectively. But it goes even beyond that. Are you fat and tall like I was? Good luck finding any clothes at a regular clothing store or department store. You have to go to stores that cater to plus or XL sizes. These clothing stores know you don't have any other options, so their prices are exorbitant. A single pair of work pants cost me $55 at one of these stores. I got 2 pairs and a sweater at another store for the same price after I had dropped 6 inches off my waistline. Being fat also means you may have to settle for clothing that isn't as well made. This clothing may be prone to tearing or ripping, especially at inopportune moments. It was common for me to keep a whole spare outfit at work just in case. I don't want to get into how many times I had to change pants because of a sudden ill-placed tear. When you're fat, you may have to settle for clothes that barely fit you, and when you do that, you risk another unexpected, though examined cost, the social one. Ever notice how you react around a fat person? Or if you are fat, how people react around you? Not necessarily the judgment, which may be withering, though unsaid. Notice how people may seem to overcompensate when passing you in a hallway or on the sidewalk. They may question getting on an elevator with you or sitting next to you on a train or bus. I was so cognizant and ashamed of my weight that I would never sit on the train next to someone who was already sitting. Even if I was dog-tired, I would remain standing. I would only sit if a pair of seats I could fit into came open. Every seat in the train car could have only one occupant, and I would remain standing rather than squish in next to someone else. And occasionally, I could see that people were thankful that I didn't. It costs a lot to go out. Movie theater or sporting event seats may be too small and necessitating paying more. Airline seats are the worst, both because of their shrinking size and the high cost of getting a second one. Also, think of the cost of maintaining your vehicle if you're grossly overweight. Not just the seats, but also the shock absorbers and tires are feeling that weight. The way people look at you when you are fat translate into how they treat you. Ever been laughed at by children because you are fat? Imagine what some adults think. Social scientists suggest that being overweight leads to negative opinions way beyond some of the other visual markers. Part of the computed cost per year also takes into account overweight people possibly making less money because fat people are commonly paid less. Because of their girth, they may be undervalued. Employers may worry that a person who is that out of shape wouldn't be a hard worker or might need more sick days. It could be that they fear the physical problems a person of higher weight may suffer. That leads to the next cost of being fat, the toll you put on your body. For years, I had bad knees. If I did any sort of physical activity that required a great amount of leg work, think soccer, basketball, or ultimate frisbee, my knees would punish me afterwards. Overweight people are at higher risk of heart disease, sleep apnea, joint pain, asthma, diabetes, and a host of other diseases. This is obviously a point I don't need to harp on too intensely. If you're fat and have ever spoken to a doctor for any reason, checkups, physical, social gatherings, in line at the store, at the sink in the public bathroom, you will know that being fat is bad for your health. Since I started losing weight, the amount of physical activity I can handle has increased. I sleep easier. I can handle stress and adverse situations better. Stairs are no longer my enemy. Being fat was hurting me, and it took me way too long to realize that it didn't have to be this way. When you combine the social challenges and the physical ones, it isn't hard to perceive another cost of being fat, the mental one. It sucks to be fat. I hated being fat. I was so unhappy being fat that I would go eat something to make myself feel better. It's the fat circle of life. As Fat Bastard said in the second Austin Powers film, I eat because I'm unhappy, and I'm unhappy because I eat. Depression is common among people who are overweight. It is the Ouroboros. Other mental issues can come out of it as well. You may have a sense of paranoia because of how others may perceive you. Inferiority complexes, which are part of depression, can be magnified by one's weight. You are hurting your own sense of self by letting this be a part of your life. Economically, it costs a lot to eat and clothe a fat person. The social and physical costs can lead to a higher mental cost. All of these things add up and can grow just as daunting as your waistline. Deciding to lose weight, to take control of your body, is a matter of the highest willpower. If you succeed, and you must succeed, you will do it by realizing that you are doing it for every reason possible. I'm losing weight because I'm sick of eating crappy food, or wearing ugly clothes, or being laughed at by children, or the pain, or the anguish. You can't just stop being fat, but you can make the decision to start being better. It's all about control. Just as an accountant controls a balance sheet, you must control your body, mind, and spirit. All right, that completes our readings and everything for this year's 2017 aois21 annual release. Obviously, we were a little bit delayed this year in the release and kind of fished it up at the last minute, but you can now purchase your copy online, both through the iBookstore and through market.aois21.com for the low price of $6. For those that are contributors and past supporters, they will be able to get a download code to get their free copies. If you sign up for the aois21 weekly email, which you can do at aois21.com or facebook.com/aois21, there will be a limited time where you'll be able to get the annual for free. Coupon code will be sent out in this next week's email, and you'll be able to get a free copy of the annual. So thank you very much for everyone who came out today. Thank you to Tom, Jim, and Corey for speaking today. Thank you to John Mulcahy for being our cameraman today. Thank you to the wonderful people at Walls of Books here in Washington, D.C. for hosting us once again, being our best friends here in downtown D.C., and truly a great place to come and find some excellent titles. So if you're ever in the area, please stop in. This video is broadcast live on the aois21 Periscope channel. It'll be posted on the aois21 YouTube channel afterwards as part of our aois21 live series, and also shared on media.aois21.com. Thank you for coming out. I'm Keith Shovlin, publisher of aois21 Media.